So we had a very interesting real-life question that came up right before Shavuos. Some of you may even know what the case was. A gentleman sadly lost his father right before Shavuos. The Kvura was going to be on the second day of Shavuos. And as we know, Shavuos, and of course it's second day Shavuos in Chutz La'aretz, it's not Yontif anymore in Eretz Yisrael where the Kvura was going to take place. So for them it's already Chol. He can't make it for the Kvura because the Petira takes place hours before Yontif in Eretz Yisrael. He's here in Toronto. He won't be able to get to the Kvura after Yontif. There's just no flight. And he won't even be able to get there before Shabbos because there's only a day between second day Shavuos and Shabbos. There's no way to catch a flight and make it there before Shabbos. Earliest he can get there is leave Sunday morning, get there sometime today into Eretz Yisrael, Monday. And the question then becomes, at what point does his Avelus start? And what point does his Avelus end? And the first thing that we would have to investigate in order to appreciate the complexity of this Shaila is the question of any time a person has a close relative who passes away in another city, and the individual, the mourner, the Avel, will not be going to the Kvura. It's not practical either for health reasons or cost or whatever reason. He can't make it to the Kvura. When does Shiva start? Does Shiva start at the time of the Kvura, or does Shiva start right away? We know the precedent for this case is in the Gemara, but it's a slightly different case. The case of the Gemara, as we'll see in just a moment, is where you are taking care of the mace and then releasing the mace for burial in another city. But you've already connected with the mace. The mace has died where the person is, and then they're going to be transporting the mace from there to the Kvura. So let's take a look at that case and see how the poskim extrapolate from there. What we're going to discover is that it's a relatively recent machlokes, and part of the reason I believe that it's relatively recent is because the technology of communication only became viable for this question to become very relevant probably in the last century and a half or so with the invention of the telegraph. But before then, it really wasn't relevant to have this issue come up because usually if a person died in another city, you'd get a letter 3 weeks later letting you know of the Petira. But with the advent of the telegraph in the who knows when the invention, 18-something, right? In the 1800s, with the advent of the telegraph, this is when communication became instantaneously available from one end of the world to the other. Then this issue became much more relevant, and this is where we see the poskim discussing the Shaila. So let's take a look at the case study in the Gemara. Amar lahu Rava livnei machuza. Rava said to and by the way, there are mountains of material on this Shaila. Mountains of material on this Shaila. And it really takes a tremendous amount of wading through. I'm sure we're just scratching the surface on this issue. The Steichemet goes on for pages and pages on this very issue. But anyway, Amar lahu Rava livnei machuza. Atun delo azlisu basar arsa, that you, who are not following the casket to its final burial destination, mechi mahadrisu apaychu mibava da'avula aschilu manu. So then as soon as you turn your face from the gate of Abula, which Rashi seems to be saying, from the outer gates of the city. From the outer gates of the city, once you sort of part ways and you're going to escort the casket up until the outer limits of the city, and then you're going to turn around and go back home, and the pallbearers will take the casket to wherever its burial place is. So that's when do you start your Avelus? Da'asisu lebeisa, as soon as you get home, right? As soon as you turn around, then that's when you should start your Avelus. And as Rashi explains, Aschilu manu yemei Avelus. That's when you should begin studying, or start counting rather, your days of Avelus. Afal gavdelo nikvar hameis ad yomim rabim. Even though the decedent may not be buried for many days hence, because there's a long journey to the Beis Akvaros. Be'afal gavda Avelus enu chalad sheistom hagolel. He says, even though normally the Gemara, the very same Gemara in Moed Katan had said that under normal circumstances, Avelus doesn't start until the sealing of the casket cover. That's when Avelus begins. When, you place the layer of dirt over the casket. Or Yistom Hagolel, whatever the method of burial is. When you seal off the casket, that's when Avelus begins. But nevertheless, L'ditchu de lo mechzi chazar aschem ke nistam hagolel. But because you're not going to be there witnessing that event, then as soon as you turn away from the casket, that's when your Avelus begins. It's as if, for you, the casket has been sealed.
In Mechuzah, they had to bury them quite a ways away.
And why is that, Alan?
Because it was a Persian imperial city. They didn't allow...
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that information. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Alan has suggested because Mechuzah was a Persian city that was very politically important to the Persian authorities, they wouldn't allow Jewish burials anywhere in the vicinity. Okay.
Because they had the Zoroastrian religion, you couldn't bury anybody in the ground. And it was considered to be tamei, so they had to bury far away.
Okay, very interesting. Let's take a look at the Rambam in Hilchos Evel, where he codifies this halacha, and it's very curious how he adds a little bit of information here. Mi shedarkan lishloach hameis l'medina acheres l'kovro ve'enam yodim masa yikaver. So notice how the Rambam slips this little tidbit of information in. He says if the normal practice is to send the decedent somewhere else for burial, and you don't know exactly when he's going to be buried. Now, that doesn't seem the case from the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't say that little tidbit. So the question is, why did the Rambam slip that little piece of information in, is that you don't know when the burial is going to take place? It almost sounds like the Rambam is trying to explain why the Avelus begins right away as soon as you turn away from the casket, since you don't have the information as to when the kfura is. This will be extremely relevant in the modern age of communication when we can ascertain exactly when the kfura is. So keep that in mind. Keep that Rambam in mind. Yes?
Isn't it also implying then that if somehow you do know that it's 2.5 days away?
Exactly. Okay.
Although not like Rashi.
It doesn't seem like Rashi. Yes, Rashi doesn't seem to add that.
Rashi's happy to say that as long as you don't, by the time you stop seeing it.
That's right. It's as if for you the casket's been covered. That's it.
It's a completely different.
It's a different right. It's a different thing. Different thing. Right. Exactly. Okay. So me'esh yachzru pnei milavoso maschilin limno shiva ushloshim maschilin lihisabel. So therefore, as soon as you turn your face away from escorting the casket, that's when you begin counting your shiva and your shloshim, and you begin your avelus period. This is further codified in Shulchan Aruch. Let's take a look how the Shulchan Aruch expresses that term. Misha darkam, source number 4 in Siman Shin Ayin Hesif Beis. Misha darkam lishloach hametz l'medina acheres l'kovro. If the practice is, and again, also there's a little also slight tidbit here. What if it's not the practice to send the mace, but it just so happens in this one circumstance you send it away? Is that going to mitigate the halacha? Is that going to change the halacha? That's also not clear. But let's say the practice is to send the mace away to another place to burial. The enam yodim masai yikaver, like the Rambam's language, you don't know when the burial is going to take place. Exactly the lashon of the Rambam. But those who are traveling with the mace, they count from the time of the burial because they're going to be at the place of the burial, and so therefore you could have two members of the same family. You could have two brothers whose father has passed away, and they start Shiva at two different times, and they end Shiva at two different times, which is a very common thing when, let's say, one brother goes to Eretz Yisrael with the mace, and the other brother stays home. Then we have this halacha of the Gadol HaMishpacha, which is in itself a very interesting halacha, that if you have one sibling or one member of the family unit who is clearly recognized as the financial or the financier of the family, let's say the person who has the financial responsibilities of providing for the rest of the family and a sort of the executor of the estate, then everyone goes according to the Gadol Shel Mishpacha, even if they've stayed home. If the gadol goes with the burial, so then everyone goes according to the kvura. So he says, Af elu shebekan ein amonim ela misha yikaver. So he says, "V'gadol hamishpacha hainu debeisa samoch alei v'gariri kulu basrei loshna ach loshna ben katan v'ish mishomer v'hushiei ben yud gimel." Okay, the rest of the Shulchan Aruch tries to define what the gadol hamishpacha is. It's a separate issue. Not for now. Maybe that will be for another time. Yes.
Does the Rambam also have the halacha that was mentioned here that those that don't go? Because we didn't really see that in this one. I assume he said it to somewhere else.
I believe so, but I don't remember. You have to take a look in the Rambam and Hilchos Eivel, the rest of the Rambam. I don't remember the rest of it, but
We would assume so.
we would assume so. Okay, so you have to go a few centuries fast forward, and we really see this issue beginning to be addressed in the 1800s when there's the new advent of this new instantaneous method of communication called the telegraph. So this is this tshuva is written to a Rav Paltiel in Baltimore from the Netziv, from Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin in Europe. He sends a tshuva to Baltimore sometime in the late 1800s. He says, "Asher chakar halacha l'maisa b'mishanodalo al yedei dilug rav," and dilug rav is a very strange term. It means like there's a huge skipping. There must be some kind of huge skip that can go from one end of the world to the other, which probably means the telegraph. Shemeis krova, that he's lost a relative, shechayev lihisabel olav b'makom acher, and so he has to sit shiva in a place where the mace has not been buried. V'nistam hagolel b'yom machar o shlishi, and the burial is only going to take place tomorrow or 2 days hence. The question is, me'emos hayaschil ha'avelos im yesh lo din mace asher meshalchin oso l'makom acher shemaschilin lihisabel miyad. Would we say that this is comparable to a case of where, like the Gemara in Moy Katan had talked about where you escort the casket and then you turn around and go home? Then for that your avelus begins right away as soon as you turn around. Is it the same thing here, that as soon as you receive the tiding, even though the kfur is not going to take place for another couple of days, does the avelus start now? Nira barur dezeh hadin eino ela b'mi shemesa mutalafanav. So the Netziv says it would seem clear to me that this halacha does not apply unless you have first engaged in some way with the decedent. The decedent was with you at the time of death. You took care of the needs of the decedent, to take care of the Chever Kaddish and the burial and all of the needs. The az keshemosr lekovro nifter hu mimenu v'noheg avelus. And only then, if you send the casket away from the city and you're not going to be accompanying it, then the Avela starts for you right away, because it seems the way that he's learning is very similar to Rashi, is that for you, since you've already escorted the deceased, you've brought it to the point where for everyone else that would be like the covering of the casket, the sealing off of the casket. For you, it's in other words, but you've gone part of the way. And that for you is as far as you're going to go, just like the sealing of the casket. You say farewell, and that's when Avelus begins. But, Masha'enken Mishahu Be'ir Acheres Velonis Asek Imo, Eno Noheg Avelus Ad Shenikvar Mamish. But if you're not with the decedent at all, you haven't had any connection at all, there's no opportunity for you to say your farewell, right? So then the Avelus does not start until the Kfura. Now listen to the raya that the Netziv brings from the same siman in Shulchan Aruch, but a sif that we haven't copied for you, but he's going to quote it for us. Mishaho diuhu shet slavo goyim karovo ba'ir acheres v'nag avelus miyad chula. The case is as follows: a guy hears that a relative of his was crucified in another city, Nebuch. I mean, these are the things that people these are things that our bubbies and azadis had to live through, right? A brother was crucified in another town, and he thought that they took care of the burial already, and so he started sitting Shiva. And then he discovers later on that Nebuch, the corpse, is still up on the crucifix. They haven't buried him. They haven't buried his brother yet. So what's the halacha? The choser umona meshayikaver. So as soon as you discover your error and you discover that the burial took place days later perhaps, then you have to start Shiva again. Shiva starts all over again from the date that the burial took place. Hare afal gav she'ein b'daito leilech la'osir b'kfuraso mikol makom ein alav chiyuv ha'avelos ad she'yikaver. You see clearly from that case of the crucifixion that even though you have no intention of going to the kvura for your brother who's been crucified, but the avelus does not start until the time of the kvura. So this is a pretty good raya, no? You'd say it's a pretty good raya. You're going to see, we're going to upgeschlag the raya later on. We're going to see another set of poskim who look at it a different way. But let's see, this is the raya of the Netziv. Velo od, ela sheyesh alav din onein, le'esar alav basar, v'yayin ad sheyishma shenikvar. The Netziv has a much bigger chiddush now as well. By the way, there's a whole group of achronim who paskin like the Netziv that avelus doesn't start until the kvura. But they're not machmir like the Netziv as far as aninus is concerned. But the Netziv goes so far as to say that you have a din of an onein as far as the restrictions in halacha that you cannot drink meat and wine and eat meat, which is the law of an onein, even though you have no way of engaging in dealing with the mace. Even though you're not going to be taking care of the Chevra Kadisha, there's nothing for you to do, he still says you have a din of an onein as far as the restrictions of an onein, as far as whether or not there's going to be a chiyuv bracha, whether you're mechuyev in other mitzvahs. The Netziv doesn't necessarily address at this point, but
until you find out, like it could be 2-3 days. Is that what you're saying?
It could be, yeah. It could be until you find out that the kvur took place. You can't eat meat and drink wine.
What about Beitar? Could have been a month or 2 months before they buried the mason.
Okay, so fine. So they didn't eat meat and drink wine. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know what the Netziv will say about that case. He brings a case of Rabbeinu Tam Shenodolo Shemesa Achoso b'makom rachok mimenu. They say the story, it's brought down in the Rush, that Rabbeinu Tam's sister had passed away in a faraway place. And va'achal basar v'shasayayin mishum sheyesh labal ve'inu mutelas alav. And the only reason why he could justify eating meat and drinking wine was because she was married. So it wasn't his responsibility. He didn't have a din of aninus because it was a married sister. V'cholku alav k'mavur b'rash moikat and sim kuf beis. And even that, they argued with him and they said, even though she's a married sister, but nevertheless you still have a din of aninus l'chumra, and you can't eat meat and drink wine. And the Netziv continues and he says, V'hachi mevur b'simin shin mem aleph sif gimel, makam shenohagim chuli elachar sheniskasku hakrovim b'tzorchei hakvura masru lahem, mutarim hakrovim b'basar v'yayin. There it talks about the laws of aninus, and it's only after the krovim have given over the mace for kvura to the Chevra Kadisha are they allowed to eat meat and drink wine. Hare dafka im nisasku hakrovim. So you see, it's only if the krovim have done whatever they need to do and fulfilled their responsibilities to the decedent and given over the mace to the Chevra Kadisha, then they have the right to eat meat and drink wine. V'chalashon ha'Yerushalmi shevia rasham mishanim sularabim ochel basar v'shosayayim dekon nimsar miyad liyad mashma chadis b'maseches bava metzia delashon mosir kadam ha'mosir davar lechavera. But if you're never dealing with the mace at all, and you just know that someone else is dealing with it, there the heter does not allow you to eat meat and drink wine. It's only if you've done whatever you need to do, and then you've given it over. It's a big chiddush of the Netziv. And therefore the same halacha will be true if the mace is in another city. He says, I'll grant you that Rabbeinu Tam found room to be makel as far as aninus, and the rush was machmir. But at the bottom line is, avelus for sure does not begin until the burial, even though you're in a completely different area. So it's not comparable to the case of where you accompany the dead until a certain place of departure. There you say your farewell, and that's why Avelus begins right away. Here you never had any connection whatsoever, so Avelus does not begin until the Kfura. Clear? Okay. There are poskim who paskin like the Netziv. I'm not going to lie to you, right? But that's not how most of American poskim go. I will tell you that there are some Israeli poskim who go like the Netziv, but it seems like Rav Moshe, Rav Greenwald, we'll see in just a moment, and it sounds like Rav Henkin, although I'm not sure, I may be mistaken about that. all paskin not like the Netziv, and we're going to see why is that, because there's a long tshuva in this day Chemed from the Rav Shapira, who was the son-in-law of the Netziv, who argued with his shver. He became the next Rosh Yeshiva of the Volozhin Yeshiva. After the Netziv closed the Volozhin Yeshiva, he reopened it on a smaller scale, and he was the next Rosh Yeshiva. He lived into the 20th century. He was also the father-in-law of one of the Soloveitchiks. I think it was either the Brisker of or Reb Chaim Brisker. I don't remember which one. But he was clearly one of the Gedolei Hador at the time. So this is quoted from the Stei Chemed. And the Stei Chemed goes on for pages. So I'm just extracting a small little snippet that is found in the Sefer Divrei Sofrim, which is a 2-volume, really an encyclopedic work on Hilchas Avelus, which is really, I find to be indispensable for difficult shilas in Hilchas Avelus. He says, V'agon Reb Shapiro, it's Rav Rafael Shapiro, Sham Dacha Rayazu. He says, Rav Shapiro deflected that proof from the case of the crucifixion. Why? He says, D'shayni hasam shadayin lo nitan hames l'kvura klal. He says, in the case of the crucifixion, you're not allowed to bury him. And because you're not allowed to bury him, that's why the kvura doesn't, the avelus doesn't begin until the actual kvura. He says, that's why avelus doesn't start. But if the mace has been given over for burial, the delivery has already been done. In other words, the Cheber Kaddish has got him. The body is being watched over by a shomer, and it's just a question of just finding the right time. But everything is set to go, right? So then he says, "Havi l'didei shehu biracheres kenikvar." Then for that person, that avel who's in another city, it's as if the person is already buried, and therefore v'chalalav avelus miyad. So in other words, it's a very interesting svara. When the authorities won't allow you to bury the relative, so then there's no closure. There's no closure, and therefore avelus can't start. I hope I'm not using too much of a touchy-feely word as closure to it. In other words, but I think it's a very apropos word. There's no closure. You can't move forward with this process because they haven't given you permission to do the kfura. But if everything is all set for the kfura, you know the kfuras are going to take place at some point. Everything is set. So then you have that sense of closure, and you can start mourning. You can start the mourning process right away. So that's the difference of opinion between the Netziv and his son-in-law. Yes?
That would affect the situation where you can't actually find a grave for the person, right? There's sometimes an issue.
Okay, that's a good... What if you can't find the grave for the person? Let me give you another example. What if it's Yantif?
Right.
And you can't do the burial for another day?
Right.
Interesting, Shiloh. Okay, so that complicates our case a little bit more, yes?
Does this connect in any way to... Like I know in Europe with my parents, when my father holds yurtzeit is basically when his parents were put on the train because you don't know.
Interesting. There's no way to ascertain when they were murdered.
Right.
And so the last time he saw them, but that's not like Nistan HaGolel. I mean, they were still alive. They could have lived on for months, conceivably. We don't know. I don't know whether you can make that tzushtel over here. But it's an appropriate thing to do because for him that was the farewell. That was the farewell. Nebuch.
Well, normal citizens usually would have based it because it was publicized that somebody's dead, right? Because then you start the avelus. If they don't publicize that somebody's dead, you don't.
Well, if you don't know, then you can't start avelus.
There's no body.
Yeah.
How can you do it?
There's no way to know. I'm skipping a whole bunch of paragraphs. I'm just getting to another point that Rav Shapiro brings in his letter in the Stei Chemed. The Hagon Rav Rafael Shapiro Sham Hevi Raya Atzuma Lishitas Mahar Sham. He's actually aligned with the Mahar Sham, which is another 19th century Rishon, Acharon rather, who also holds that the Avelus starts right away, even though you're in another city, you never had any contact with the mace. And what is his raya? The Ramban wrote a very important halachic work called Toras Ha'adam. It's all about Hilchos Avelus and Hilchos Kvura. And within Toras Ha'adam, there's actually a Hashkafa section called Shar HaGemul, which is a very important sefer on Machshavas Yisrael about the afterlife, but that's another discussion. And then it's quoted in the Torah, V'zel Lashona. Nishal merav Shvira v'Rabbeinu Hai, these are the Gaonim, and the question is as follows: Man di'isei b'medinta u'karova b'medina acheres, someone who is in one country or one city and his relatives are in another place. V'harago shiltan v'lo nitan l'kvura. The Sultan kills this person, he's an enemy of the state, he is executed, and he has not yet been given over for burial. Karovav me'ema saimonim. When do the relatives begin starting their Shiva? Misha'as shemua. They begin as soon as they hear of the death. Omidamina la dahad behilchos, and this is comparable to a case in the Bahag, kadnafik shichva mimasa v'ichsilei mikruvim chadashaita mikmiregel chalala velus alayu. That if a decedent is taken away from a city and hidden from the krovim, even if it's just 1 hour before Yantiv, Avelus begins for them. Even though as soon as the mace is taken away from them outside the city, even though it's imminently going to be Yantiv soon, and they know the kfurs may not take place for several days, nevertheless, Avelus starts right away. Or, as it's brought down in Maseches Machos, which is one of the smaller Masechtos, that when do people who have been executed by the state, when do you start counting Avelus for them? When people have given up hope that they're ever alive again. In other words, when you surmise that they've died, even though you don't know that they've necessarily been buried. So you see from these two cases, the case that the Rav Shapiro brings from the Ramban, that even if you're completely in another part of the world, he says that even if he says the only thing that there's a suffix is shenistapku. Maybe there's a difference is if they don't allow him to be buried, maybe then you can't start the Shiva until they bury him. Or by those who are killed by the state, maybe there's another reason why not to start the Avelus right away. But in our case, the Avelus, no question, would start right away. So he says, it seems that this is a very clear proof that even if you're in another city, but you get to gather information that the person has died, even though the likur hasn't taken place yet, the Avelus begins right away. So we have a father-in-law and a son-in-law disagreeing in Psak Halacha, and not only that, but the story is said that when Rav Shapiro's father-in-law passed away, and he and his wife were in another city, when the Netziv passed away, he told his wife to begin Shiva right away. In other words, Keneged his father-in-law's psak, who had just passed away. So his own daughter had to follow her husband's psak because she was married to her husband, which is sort of a little ironic. Rav Yekusiel Greenwald was the Rav in Columbus, Ohio, in the 40s and 50s, I think maybe even into the 60s. He wrote one of the most indispensable Sfarim on Hilchos Avelus called the Kolbo al Avelus. It's sort of a throwback to a time in America when a Rav was a Rav. When a Rav could sit in the middle of nowhere in Columbus, Ohio, and be a Gaon Atzum who had learned in the finest yeshivas under the greatest Rosh Yeshiva, and be Machaber Sfarim, and the rest of the world around him was still, middle 20th century America, and here he was in his own universe, right, being Machaber, brilliant Sfarim. He had such Bekias, it's unbelievable. And he didn't have a CD-ROM. He didn't have any of the things that we have today. And the amount of knowledge that he had was just voluminous, just incredible.
He's actually related to Tilner Rabbi. But being in Columbus in the 1940s, he didn't practice as a...
Yeah. I actually had the privilege of spending Pesach with his son. I forget, Yankel Greenwald, I think. He was an older man by the time we spent Pesach with him. But anyway, let's take a look at what he says. And there, again, the Kolbo has a huge amount of information on this subject as well. He says, Hevesi po besifri bekama makomos merishonim migdolei haposkim shapasku sha'avelus terem kavura havi avelus. I've brought you from many, many poskim that avelus begins before the kavura. Avelus begins before the kavura. Now that in itself is a bizarre suggestion, because really the Gemara says mishanistam hagodel. I mean, that's really the conventional wisdom, is that the avelus doesn't start until you cover the decedent. He says, "V'halo mefurish b'maseches machos perak yud beis b'mishanafol lenahar achar shenisyashu levakshu yisablu af terem shenikvar." It's a mefurish example in Maseches Machos. He says, if a person, you see a guy fall into a river, and you fish the river, what do they call that? You drag the river, right? You drag the river to try and find the body. They can't retrieve the body, but they give up hope of ever finding the body. They surmise he's been washed out to sea or whatever it is. So then the avelus begins even before the burial. Ve'al tomar dezehu kfura. So don't tell me that he's got a burial in the river. That's his burial. No, that's not called burial. Halo paskinan she'im nimsa acharechein v'nitan lekvur she'en tzarach lehisabel mechadash. Because we paskin that if he's found afterwards, then you have to bury him, and you don't have to have a new avelus. And so you see, therefore, that the avelus was when you already sort of decided, you already gave up hope of ever retrieving him. He says, even though there are those who hold that you're not supposed to sit Shiva until you actually retrieve the body and bury, he says, it's interesting, there is a shita that says you don't begin the Shiva until you find the body, but that's only because of a suffix eishes ish, because if you were to sit Shiva before you found the body, maybe the wife would figure it's okay for her to remarry, and it's a suffix of an eishes ish, so we don't want to give her the impression that she can remarry, so therefore we hold off on Shiva until we find the body.
Isn't it an exceptional circumstances does bring a riot from? I mean, you're riyayish, you're ever going to find the body. You give it up on it.
Yeah, but there's a whole issue of ego in here. There's a whole issue of how can you be matur in aguna. We don't have any evidence that the man is...
that's easy, but as far as starting the avelus, I mean, once you give up hope of ever finding the body, I mean...
So that's, he says, that's the haschalas avelus, even though you have to bury the body afterwards, even though we know that the body will still have to be buried afterwards.
You're never going to find the body. You're miyayish.
We don't know. We figure we're miyayish that we're not going to find a living person. That's what we're miyayish from. But we're not miyayish that we'll never find the body. Maybe the body will wash up. You never know. He says, that once the body is given over to the public, meaning the Chevra Kadisha, that's when the avelus begins. He says, why then did Chazal only paskin that only if you're taking the mace to another city do those who remain begin avelus right away? Afilu term shazvu hayir. He says it should be as soon as they leave the city, then avelus begins. Gam kimedumali shetitzmach mehara azu michshalim. He says if we do not paskin this way, he says, and this is to me a fascinating argument. He says if we were to say like the Netziv, that the avelus doesn't start for the guy in the other city until you know that the kfur has taken place, he says, I think that this could actually be very destructive. Why? Shemisha kibul telegram me Europa shemesla avivo imo ve'eno onein gameno misabel. He says, so first of all, he's not going to have a din of an onein, because he says most poskim disagree with the Netziv that you have a din of an onein because there's nothing for you to do, and avelus doesn't start until the kfura. So what's going to happen? He says, "V'yelech lemischarav u'lemasa'av v'yasiach daito mikol." He says, "What? So what are you telling this guy to do? Go to work. You're not an onein. You're not an avel. So go to work." What is that? The appropriate mindset that you want to provide for a person who's just lost a parent? Go to work and live. Just live normally.
Why is he not an onein?
Because there's nothing for him to do. An onein is a person who's osek b'meis. That's why he's potter from all mitzvahs. The Netziv had a chiddush. The Netziv's chiddush is that you're an onein even if you don't have anything to do with the body. And he tried to bring, but most poskim disagree with the Netziv.
But is not the definition of an onain just the fact that there's no kvura?
No.
It's not totally. I didn't.
No, it's totally. The aninus is totally in the fact that you are so tarud in your asek with the mace, and the proof is that as soon as you give over the mace to the Chevra Kadisha, you're not an onain anymore.
Right.
You don't have a din of an onain. So
even before kvura.
Even before kvura.
That's a lot today. As soon as the Chevra Kadisha takes
so the Chevra Kadisha takes it away. You don't have a din of an onain. At least for certain tefillah issues. It maybe is still an issue about an isser of. Depends. The post can discuss whether you still usser the basar v'yayin, but technically you're not an onain anymore. So in any event, so therefore he says, Al kain nira li shekadai lismoch al hagaonim halalu sheni shekibel telegram in Medina acheres v'yefshlo lahagia sham sheyisabel miyad al pi hagemara moed katan chav beis. And therefore I paskin, like Rav Rafal Shapiro and like the Maharshan and like a whole group of other poskim, Chochmas Adam he quotes and a whole bunch of others. If you turn the page, you'll see the whole litany. He goes through how he says, Halo yesh lanu dai poskim shemei kilin. I'm skipping several lines. He says, we have a whole bunch of poskim who are mekel, uvavelus halo nitztavinu lahakel afilu biyachid neged rabim. Im lo shehalacha kvar niskabla etzel b'nei Yisrael. He says, we're told that we should be mekel in Hilchas Avelus, even when there's one opinion against a multitude of opinions. Now, why is this called a kula, that the Avelus begins right away? It's called a kula because there'll be fewer days of turmoil in your life. That's why it's called a kula. If you start Avelus right away, your Shiva will end that sooner. Whereas if the kfur is going to be 2 or 3 days from now, it will be an additional 7 days after the 2 or 3 days. That's why he calls it a kula.
But he just said that people are going to forget about the whole thing. So is that?
So he says that's why I feel that's another argument as to why I feel you should paskin this way, because of the destructive thing that could come from it. He says, "Im lo shalacha kvar niskab leitzel b'nei Yisrael, aval bahalacha zu halo hamarshal v'turei zahav chachmas adam Yehuda Yale tshuva me'ahava erech shai knesses agdoyle v'chol gdolei sfardim." He says, "V'kol yichriya hastei chemed v'od kulam pasku limnos miyom hamisa." He says all of these achronim paskin that Avela starts from the day of death, not from the day of Kvura like the Netziv. In other words, he is representing the Netziv in the minority. Whether or not that's accurate, I can't tell you. I haven't taken a poll, but it certainly seems that way from Rav Greenwald's his encyclopedic database that he has in front of him to be able to say who wins the vote. So therefore, Al kain nearly lakayim piskam shel hagaonim Befal Shapira v'shalos shuas maharsham va'od sheni shekibel telegram miropo me'aratzos habris v'yefshelo linsol limanos zimel zayin me'avelos misha shekibel ha-telegram. As soon as you get the telegram, that's when Shiva starts. Lo and behold, Rav Moshe paskins the same way. In Siman, in Yoredeya Chelak Aleph, Siman Reish and Gimel, that's in source number 8. He writes, B'meis krovam b'medina rechoka tuva va'achadim nasu l'sham va'achadim nisharu b'kan masa yaschilu elu shebekan ha'avelus. So Rav Moshe has the famous tshuva about when a person dies in a faraway place. Some of them are flying there, and others are remaining here. So when does the Avelus begin for the respective members of the family? Nishalti miyadidi harav Rav Naftali Karlbach Shlita b'meis krovim b'medinas Belgia. So we have a person whose relative passed away in Belgium. Presumably the Shaila is poster of Moshe here in the United States. Va'achadim nasu be'aeroplane l'sham lios etzel hakvura va'achadim nisharu be'bo. Some members of the family are traveling by plane to Belgium, and some are remaining here in the States. Va'akvur yadua shalotiyah ad sheyavo hanosim mikan l'sham. And it's clear that the kvur will not take place until they arrive. Now, here Rav Moshe is very clear, and I think he's favorning the Rambam. He's anticipating the Rambam. The Rambam's language of, you don't know when the Kfur is going to take place. So you see, and by the way, the Netziv deals with that language of Rav Ovadia Yosef, Zatzal deals with that language as well. Many poskim say that don't get too caught up in that language that you don't know when the Kfur is taking place, because all the Rambam meant to say is that it's not a Kavura Rechoka, it's not a burial that's taking place right outside the city. It's a burial that's taking place far away. And because it's taking place far away, we consider there to be a nistam hagolel, a sealing off of the dead, as soon as you turn your face. If you knew the burial was going to take place within a few hours, so then you'd have to wait, because then it's considered to be within your proximity, within your purview. That's all the Rambam meant. So don't get too caught up in that language. And I think that's what Rav Moshe is anticipating as well. He says, Vaheshavti, so the question is, when does the Avelus begin for the people who are remaining here in the United States? Vaheshavti dilanias daiti maschilin elu shebekan lihisabel miyad keven shelo yisu l'sham. I responded that the Avelus begins right away because they're not traveling there. Umasha b'simin shinayin hesif beis isa b'sholchin hames l'medina acheres l'kover shemaschin limno shivu shloshem me'esh shechazu p'nei milavos shehu be'enam yodim masa yikaver. He says, what about that language of the Shulchan Aruch based on the Rambam where it says that you don't know when the burial is going to be, only then do you start Avelus right away. And here we know when the burial is going to be. It's going to be like in a day and a half when they arrive in Belgium. He says, "Eno mishum dinidin safek ba'avelus l'kula nidon kevar nikvar." He says, you don't say that, well, we don't know when the burial is going to take place. It could take any place between now and 3 days from now. So we'll start the Avelus now because we can be mekel. He says, that's fallacious. He says, the hayesh al kol panim eza shos sheyadua shelo nikvar kefi ha'omen shel arichas haderech shelefanim hu kevar biyom nasheni. He says, we know for sure that when we send a mace out for burial outside of the city of Mechuzah, we know it's going to at least take several hours. So don't tell me that Avelus should start right away if you know that for hours or even a full day, they're not going to get to their destination. That's not the reason. As I spoke out from Reb Moshe. He says it's because the point that the Rambam is trying to make is that it's a faraway place. That's why you don't know when the burial is going to take place. He says that's only when the mace is being taken far away. But if the mace is being just taken outside the outskirts of the city and people will come back to you the very same day, tell you we took care of it, then you have to wait until the actual burial before the Avelus begins. He says, and from here, the journey from here to Belgium is very far. He says, there's no way that they can get there in a moment to start Avelus right away. From here to Belgium, it'll take you at least 10 hours or whatever it was back then. And therefore, even according to the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, you'd have to begin the Avelus right away. Not because there's an uncertainty as to when the Kfur is taking place, but any time you're turning away from the Avel and you're not going to be there for the Kfur begins right away, like Rav Rafael Shapiro. Even though he doesn't cite this whole machlokus that took place before him, I don't know whether he was fully immersed in that machlokus. Maybe, I don't know. But he paskins like Rav Rafael Shapiro. Okay.
Is this a full Avelus in all respects? So, for example, and I guess the practical, I don't know if we're going to get to that, does Yom Tov break the Avelus?
Presumably so. Presumably Yom Tov would break the Avelus. And therefore you have this very unusual situation where conceivably your Avelus would begin and end before the Kfura.
And is that practically what was...
So this is the complexity of the Shiloh that we had to deal with. What we had to deal with was a situation where the person discovers that his father passed away a few hours, let's say 10 hours before Shavuos. It's maybe 2 hours before, 3 hours before Yantif in Eretz Yisrael, where the father is. Clearly, the Avelus won't begin until after Shavuos, and there'll be a full 7 days of Shiva for the relatives that are in Eretz Yisrael. But for this fellow, if the Avelus begins right away, it's fully halachic Avelus, and therefore technically one should argue that he starts sitting Shiva that day of Erev Shavuos, and then once Shavuos enters, Shiva is over. Because that's the halacha, that Yom Tov breaks Shiva. And therefore, I think one could legitimately paskin that way. I didn't paskin that way for the individual, even though it seems like most poskim go like Rav Moshe and like Rav Rafael Shapiro. Simply because there were two factors that I took into account. Number one, he was traveling to Eretz Yisrael to be with the rest of his family. And so arguably it just looked too bizarre even from a halachic standpoint, it just looks too strange that the Avelus for him should finish before the Kfura and begins for everyone else in the family after the Kfura. That far we haven't seen. The difficulty that I have and that I had and I still have, and really it requires perhaps much more analysis and a lot more time to spend on this shaila, is that if you already started the Avelis before Yantif, you can't have it both ways. We go according to the Divrei HaMeikol, and so if the Avelis started before Yantif, it ends, and if it doesn't start before Yantif, then it begins after Shavuos. But what I instructed the Avel is to begin sitting before Shavuos, like Rav Moshe and Rav Fol Shapiro say, but that he should commence Shiva together with his family once he gets to Eretz Yisrael, and even before he gets to Eretz Yisrael, he should commence Shiva because of the fact that the rest of his family was sitting. And there is an argument to be made that you could be a nigrar after the rest of the family. He's got two siblings that are in Eretz Yisrael that are sitting Shiva as well. There is no gadol hamishpacha, but you could make the argument that because it's 2 against 1, maybe he could be counted as a part of them, especially since he's going to be going there. But I did tell him that because this was really a chumrah, he does have a right to subtract the days that he already sat, and he could get up from Shiva earlier than the rest of his family.
Is there any reason to think that Eretz Yisrael would be any different than the other?
I don't think so. Not as far as Hilchas Avelis are concerned. Rav Avaji Yosef, Jonathan Jacob pointed this out to me, very interesting, at the end of the tshuva in Yabia Omer. He has an interesting shaila. If you turn to page 4, he says, "Vatabeit eni b'shailos atshuvas pnei mevin shenishal b'misha kibel mavrek b'yom Shabbos kodesh erev Chag HaShavuos." A guy gets a telegram on Shabbos, which is Erev Shavuos. In other words, Shavuos is a Sunday, Monday, and Erev Shavuos is Shabbos, or Shavuos is Sunday, because it's in Eretz Yisrael, and Shabbos is Erev Shavuos, and he gets the telegram on Shabbos. Sha'achiv nifter bo bayom baboker, that his brother just passed away that day. Im haregel mevatel imenu gezerah Shiva. There the shaila is, does Shiva start on Shabbos or not? So there Rav Ovadia wants to argue that it could be because the Shiva doesn't start in its full intensity, even though technically there is a Shiva on Shabbos. Right, as soon as you get the word, as soon as you receive word that the person has died and you're not going to be going to the Kvura, so then Shiva starts right away. So, but can you argue that since you're starting Shiva right away, that Shavuos will break the Shiva? So he takes into account not only the fact that you're getting this through a shmua, you're getting this through tidings because you're not going to be attending the Kvura, so Shiva starts right away, but also the fact that it's on Shabbos. So even though Rav Ovadia is prepared to say that really Shiva doesn't start for you until after Shavuos, it's only because of 2 mitigating factors. One, because you're breaking your Shiva's coming up short because it's right before Yantif, and 2, it's starting on Shabbos. But in a case where Erev Shavuos would be Chol, that it sounds like he would say that the Shiva begins right then and it stops on Shavuos. So